I feel like a lot of artists say this, but it's hard to pinpoint when exactly I got into anything. Um, so really like one thing I like to point out a lot is that growing up when I was I was like in grade school and stuff, my dad, on the side, he did like part-time magician stuff. So he's, you know, always putting my head in boxes with swords and making me levitate and stuff when I was like, you know, 10, 11, 12. So, there's kind of that weirdness factor that I sort of got into at a really early age. And a lot of, like classic, at the same time, he was into a lot of like classic monsters, Universal monsters, all those movies and stuff. So I kind of worked my way from the ground up with a lot of film influence. But yeah, when it comes to actual art, it's personally, I oftentimes take more influence from other mediums rather than just art and, literal either illustration or stuff. I love that stuff too, but um I always kind of feel like I can imbue a little bit more of myself into it when maybe for reference, I'm not pulling from other illustrators, I'm pulling from, movies or music or things like that. So, yeah, it's a weird thing. It's hard to say when exactly I get into anything, but yeah, I would say definitely from the very beginning, there was always that, I guess familial stuff. My grandmother was an artist. She was really the only other one in our family, but I never met her. She died before I was born, but I grew up seeing her stuff in the house. And actually just my parents just came and visited me. I grew up in Pacific Northwest, Portland area, and now I live in rural Georgia. So they took a road trip and they actually brought a couple of her paintings down here. So I finally have kind of been able to come full circle, and now I have some of her work in my house. So there's
Nice.
definitely, yeah. So while it's not super overt, there's definitely a lot of that familial stuff, but that was sort of just a jumping off point. It allowed me to kind of expand my horizons from an early age and kind of just look for the weirder stuff, more just kind of dig deeper into all sorts of genres and art styles and mediums and things like that. So I think that was kind of, if I can pinpoint anything, that those few things definitely kind of, I think, just encouraged me to look for more stuff. So it was that, and of course I'd just been sketching forever, and you know, uh, there's kind of a there's an interesting gap there because I was doing music for a little while in high school, but kind of decided it wasn't really much for me. Maybe I'll get back to it, but I decided I liked the visual side of it more than I actually liked making music. So yeah.
Like, what were you playing, like guitar, or was it like a
I
certain
did
instrument?
guitar, bass, and vocals just in various things. I was mostly into like punk and things like that. So not to belittle it, but a little easier to write. A little
Yeah,
easier
yeah.
to just a little easier to just get out there because I haven't really gotten into back into punk stuff since I was in high school. But it's definitely still an influence. Just if nothing else, just sort of a kind of DIY approach to things. Even like in my medium approaches, it's like I don't really have one way I do it. I've just always kind of carved sort of my own DIY way to create images that are through a variety of mediums and mixing those all together in a sort of non-conventional way. So, it's a lot of essence that influences me and kind of got me started. It's not really like direct things. It's just I like the essence of various things, and it brought me into uh, doing what I do now. So, hope that makes sense.
Hell, it makes a lot of sense, man. And
Yeah.
like, I love seeing your process. And on Instagram, you'll do like a time lapse, like you did for Mortalis. You did a whole thing,
Yeah.
and it was just so cool how you layer everything and whatnot. Yeah, man. I'm actually wearing like a fresh fruit for rotting vegetable shirt right now.
There you go.
Dead Kennedys are one of my favorite bands. Jello Biafra also said, I think I'm gonna totally butcher this quote, but album art is one of the most important aspects of an album. It can
Yeah.
100% make or break a record.
Oh
And
yeah.
I assume you believe in that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are albums that have not so great artwork that I love, but oftentimes I'll skip over it because it doesn't grab me, you know. Um, but luckily, you know, we're in the realm here with especially metal, you know, it has I don't think I'm breaking any boundaries here by saying it has the coolest artwork out of pretty much any genre. Just because it's similar to like horror, you know, like in movies, you know, a lot of horror movies are willing to experiment and go places that other genres aren't. And there's nothing wrong with being more reserved. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of there you go. My cat's going behind the Peter Steele tapestry
It's
like he
always
likes
the
to do.
orange cat.
Yeah, I have two. I have a white and gray, or I have a white and gray and a white and orange, and yeah, I'm just gonna let him do his thing. I'm gonna let him do his thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So, uh, don't get me wrong. I have a lot of influences from other people. You know, I like there's some pop stuff I like. There's I don't like to pick and choose too much. Just as long as something grabs me, it grabs me, and um, definitely with what you're saying with album art. For example, like I mean, not to get into this too early because it's a whole rabbit hole and you know it's been done to death at this point. But it's like if I see an AI cover, I'm just like not gonna listen to it because it's like it's lazy, you know, and it almost I mean it is personal, but it's at the same time like nothing personal. It's just the fact that like I don't want to see that shit. So like if I am like seeing new music showing up either on social media or if I'm at a store or something and I see an AI cover, it's just like okay, like just keep moving. I don't want to look at it. So unfortunately that hinders that band's opportunity for more people to find them because I know there's a lot of like-minded people out there. But conversely, you know, you see something really cool and I guess album art has just always been there from day one. You know, easily you can point to some of the classics, and it doesn't have to be illustration. You know, I love photography and stuff too. I mean, anybody can point to the debut like Black Sabbath album cover and be like, it's just you know so ominous and iconic about that um, image that you know you kind of have to investigate. And sometimes stuff is more you know complicated, but sometimes it just really takes a simpler approach like that. And you know, of course like Vince Locke for Cannibal Corpse, you know, when you're a teenager, it's like there's nothing cooler than that. So when I was in high school or middle school, probably listening to Cannibal Corpse, I was like, well, you know, this is it. There's nothing cooler than uh yeah, what he does, you know, a bunch of zombies butchering up a bunch of babies and stuff.
Oh yeah, that is the cover that like really got me to death metal
Yeah.
because like I loved a lot of thrash shit, and it was a lot of album covers for me like Ed Repka, fucking
Yeah.
amazing man. And then seeing that shit where it's like butchered at birth, and it's like what the fuck is this, man?
Yeah.
And then you listen to it, and then it ruined my life. But I love death metal, and a lot of that art really got me into it. And it's like people don't really realize how important album art is when it comes to a band. And what's the real tragedy with AI is I feel like a lot of artists, you listen to the band, you kind of get an idea, and you make sure the music kind of represents the art. Where AI, it's of all these different artists, and it's kind of just doesn't really
Yeah.
represent the art at all, which
Yeah.
is for me the biggest issue with it. Um,
Right, right. And I think sometimes people miscount the ideas that artists bring to the table too. They think, well, we have this idea, we can put it into a program and we can make it happen. And that's great, but I think the other important thing is like the artist's perspective is a big part of it as well. So while someone may have a crystal clear idea that they're bringing to the table, you know, not to toot my own horn, but like just to speak for myself and a lot of other artists, we do have ideas that maybe people who aren't as visually inclined, and you know, it's no shade or anything like that. To them, it's just that, you know, they kind of we're experts in our own respective fields, and when you respect that, when I respect musicians being the experts at what they're at, and when they respect me being an expert at what I'm an expert at, that's when something truly great happens. So it's a little bit of that. You need that. I think bands and artists both need that willingness to let go and trust each other. And that's when the best stuff happens. And unfortunately, when it's one-sided like that and like prompting and stuff like that, or you're paying someone to do AI, which is the real tragedy
Yes.
because you just got terribly ripped off. Um, but
Crazy.
yeah, no, I think there needs to be that conversation, there needs to be, it's very much a relationship, I've made friends with so many bands I've worked with at this point who I just chat with on a regular basis, and I think, and while that doesn't always happen, um I think you find a lot of like-minded people, but also people who have different perspectives. And that's a good thing that, you're both bringing different perspectives to the table. And I think, once again, that's where the magic happens.
For sure, man. Do you prefer people like kind of giving you an idea of what the art's gonna be, or do you like them to just be like, all right, here's the music, do whatever the fuck you want?
Um, you know, I'd say there's pros and cons to both. It's definitely easier when a band just says, "Hey, draw this." Because even with that, like, artists are always going to bring their own spin to it. So even if it's pretty direct, like, I'll still be pretty proud no matter of what I do. Just because you spend time with it, and you have to live with the artwork for a little while, and by the end, you've kind of gone through this whole hero's journey, if you will, of the process. But Yeah, no, it just depends. There's been some instances where, for example, Mortalis, that's how I found you actually, is through Mortalis from being on with you.
I heard.
Yeah, and so I had listened to their episode after they put out Iron Jungle, um, that single cover, and then again, I had listened to the most recent episode when with the Earthworks stuff. So, thing about them is like they had a pretty clear idea of what they wanted. They had an idea of, like, they want the composition to be like this, they want the perspective to be like this, they want all these specific things. And honestly, that takes a lot of the burden off of my process, because sometimes I think I don't want to say bands forget, but you know time is money, and a lot of that time is just thinking of stuff. It's gathering reference. I just go on Pinterest and I look for a bunch of either photographic or film like examples, just various things that capture the vibe, and that takes its own time. Let alone just sketching and coming up with all that sort of stuff. So luckily, they actually had a pretty good idea in mind both times. They had that like hourglass idea, and I remember the first
So
thing I
sick.
said, yeah, thank you. It's still one of my favorite covers, and they had this idea of the hourglass, and I just remember the first thing I said, it's like, well, we want to make sure it doesn't just look like Piece of Time, by Atheist, because there's a lot
Yeah.
of hourglass covers, but immediately I was like, all right, like, how can we spin this in a way that is not like the more iconic uses of this trope, and kind of make our own. So, but I mean, yeah, it's like when I was talking to Austin, they had this idea. It's like, all right, put the city in the bottom, put the, like, natural world on the top, and it's burning and going in. And so they had a pretty clear idea of that. And it honestly did make things easier on me. But there's also an element of like, even when they do that, I always try and be like, hey, how about we maybe add this as well? Or just because inevitably compositionally, there's gonna, I don't want to say the bands will leave things out that they're thinking of, but when they let go a little bit, and then they allow me to step in and aid those things that they want with supplemental items, or even sometimes taking some things away, not because I want to do less work, but because it's going to make a better image. Um, so yeah, they're an example of, they have a pretty good idea of what they wanted. And Earthworks was really cool too, because it was very different from a lot of the stuff I do. I like to work on darker backgrounds, and I was like, well, this time we're doing it on a white background. And I mean, that's the painfully obvious example, but like, like, it seems so rudimentary, but but I mean, the way I work and the way like traditionally I develop a lot of textural elements, I just knew from the beginning that was something that would be uh it would give me a lot of good opportunities for that. So, um they had a pretty good idea of that as well. And I know I'm just going right back to Mortalis for all this, but I mean, they're just a good example of people who had a pretty clear idea of what they wanted. And then we changed some things up. Like that priest guy in the middle was supposed to be on the ground around a crowd of people. I ended up changing it to where it's more of a deity floating. Just because compositionally, it, in the bottom, like it just it wouldn't have worked out. I think the way maybe they were envisioning it, which again, they trusted me with that, and I really appreciate that. So, and then it's like the crowd of people, I made more of these like ghostly shapes to kind of look like remnants of past people as opposed to like this flock. And drawing a giant crowd of people probably would have costed them more, and I don't know if that was in their budget. So, so
Yeah.
that's a big part of it too. But at the
Cool.
same time, I also love when things are more open-ended. I mean, I do have a couple examples here. So, uh, one example maybe we I did this cover I think it came out last year, but Pallid Veil. You can't really see it in the light. But this was a 7-inch and it was through Total Dissonance Worship, but it was a song that Luke LeMay, Dave Davidson, Liam Wilson, and Elliot Hoffman collaborated on. So there's
Awesome.
members of, yeah, so it's like Gorguts, Revocation, Dillinger Escape Plan, and Car Bomb, like all coming together and making a song. So that was something where Dave from Revocation, he was like, here's the lyrics, like just make something. And I had a pretty immediate idea of what that was going to be. And it just worked. Sometimes it's like, all right, here's the lyrics, make an image. All right, here you go. Here's a sketch. And they're like, great. Uh, and oftentimes I've actually found more often than not that's the case, especially when, once again, you're trusting your artists to make something that they think is going to serve what the band is looking for. And of course, nobody knows the band better than the band themselves, but I think sometimes when they work with artists, they can kind of help find out more about themselves. And that's a instance where I think that definitely happens.
For sure, man. And it's so interesting because that is like one of my, when I saw I was so fucking happy when I saw the reveal of that. I'm like, oh my God, that's Noah's work. I like knew
Of
instantly,
the
you know?
the Paladville?
Yeah, no, for Mortalis when they,
Yeah.
for Iron
Yeah,
Jungle.
Earthworks.
But
Yeah.
yes, yeah, I am familiar with that piece as well. But
Yeah.
it was just so exciting, man, because I love your art and I'm really glad that like you're
Thank
starting
you.
to really branch out and really get like build a really big catalog of bands under your belt. I'm just
Thank
curious,
you.
on average, you were talking about the process a little bit. Um, what on average, how long does it take for you from conception to completion to finish, an album?
It all depends. Like, honestly, most of it depends on like band communication because sometimes I'll send off a sketch and uh, it'll be like I don't get a response for like 2 weeks. So that'll stretch things out, and then I have to do other stuff in the meantime. So therefore, the final art will take longer because I'm working on something else, as opposed to if they had just gotten back to me right away, it might have happened in a week. Um, I would say usually it depends on how simple something is. Um, like I don't know, for example, I've started doing beer labels, which is pretty fun.
Beer
Um,
labels.
yeah, so I just did this for Brewhouse Brewing in Portland. You can't really see
Oh,
it in
that's
the light.
awesome. Yeah, I
But
can
yeah,
see
there you
it.
go. Yeah. And I have the original right here too, actually. So, it's about that
Sweet.
big in real life. But that's something where that sketch took me a conception to sending off a sketch, and I do all my sketches digitally so I can tweak them and we can, because I like giving that wiggle room, and when it's digital, it's like you don't have to start over. So, I mean, that took me like a day or two to make that sketch happen, like starting working on it to when I'm sending it out. Um, and then the final piece, I want to say only took me a few days, maybe a couple of days. less than a week for sure, as opposed to like if you get something like here you go. This was for Imperial Triumphant this year, the Vile Luxury
So cool.
reissue cover. That took a while because there's so many moving pieces. Granted, I did that to myself because they were just like, hey, come up again. They were like, hey, come up with something. And I was like, all right, if it's gonna be on an LP, I can put a lot of detail in there. As opposed to
Yes.
something like a beer label, like I can put a lot of detail in there, but that doesn't mean it's gonna show up because again, this is like, 3.5 inches tall. So uh you gotta understand where it's going and what the final use of it is. So sometimes like if it has a smaller output, I won't put as much detail in it because you're just not gonna see it anyway. And why put it there if it's gonna go to waste? But if it's something a little bigger, you know, smaller stuff, probably maybe a week tops, as opposed to like an album can be everywhere from a couple weeks to a month, depending on communication and depending entirely on how many times we adjust the sketches. So, because that, like, we did a bunch of like color, the Imperial Triumphant one, we did a few color variations. We made some like just lighting adjustments, but sometimes people are like, well, add this in and add this in and add this in, which sometimes is not the best thing, but
Hmm.
you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it ranges. It sometimes I surprise myself. Things I think are going to take forever take a week, and then things I think are going to take a week take a month. So, but I mean, at the same time, that depends on when the deadline is because it's always going to have to be done by the deadline. So, if it's a more open-ended thing and they're like, "Hey, we don't care if you give us this in a week or a month," I'm going to take the month because there's maybe I can sit with it a little longer and uh, you know, make make the necessary adjustments along the way that maybe I wouldn't have in a shorter amount of time, and that ends up usually being a better result. Just because and that again, it's only if they care. It's if they
Yeah.
really need it right away, I'm gonna give it to them when they need it because you don't want to. There's production time and there's you know, especially if you're putting stuff on vinyl, you need to get that in right away so you can get it in however long that takes. Nowadays, it's not as bad as it used to be, but a couple years ago, it was like ridiculous the wait times on vinyl. So
Yeah, I think it was around 6 to 8 months or something.
yeah, as
Um,
opposed to like, I mean, luckily, this was I want to say, yeah, the Imperial. This was through Century Media, and they get things done pretty quickly, but. And then, oh, I mean, like for example, Satas. These are my buddies of Satas. This album, Eden Trough, just came
yeah,
out. That I feel like had a really quick vinyl turnaround. They did it through Vinyl X and Total Dissonance put it out. As the
interesting.
same with Paladville, but I feel like that was really quick. Um, which is a breath of fresh air because it used to take just forever. So
Yeah, and bands would just sit on their material for so long because they're just waiting months and months for this
oh my God.
vinyl, to know when it comes in so they can announce it and everything. Just
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so hell.
I mean, some albums I've been sitting on for like I sat on for 3 years, before the artwork even saw the light of day. Like,
Wow.
I don't have the vinyl yet, but Malicide by Molten. It has this knight with the
Great
cross
cover.
ripped from. Thanks. I go back and forth. It might be my favorite cover I've done, just because I'm so into like medieval history and art and stuff like that.
That was
So
something I was going to ask. Yeah, if you have like a
yeah,
favorite cover you've done, that's might be
it
one of
might
my
be.
favorites.
I
Because I
don't like
love.
to. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
don't like to
know.
pick favorites because I like different things for different reasons, but I think it's the most me cover I've done. But at the same time, it's like that Imperial cover is very like, I don't know, it's so I think there's an element, even when it's like grotesque, I like to imbue kind of a sense of glamour and glitz into stuff, and I think that really captured that. So you never know. And then meanwhile, it's like that Acetus album had like 7 pieces in it, so it varies, but yeah, that Molten album, I mean, that took a long time to come out. I want to say they wrapped that up in 2021 and then it came out like May of this year, I think. I can't remember
Jesus.
when exactly, but yeah, March maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes the shit takes time, you know?
Yeah, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
That's a great album. I mean, that's if I could tell anyone to check out an album that hasn't been checked out, that's Molten Malicide. That album is I've been listening to an unlisted like SoundCloud link of it for I mean, so long now. So it's cool when that finally gets out, and an album that not only I liked working on, but something I'm really excited on sonically, to be out there and other people can enjoy it. And it's like, yeah.
For sure, man. Now, I'm just curious, do you remember your first client and how did
Uh-huh.
that whole thing go? Were you stressed? Like, what was that whole process like?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I never really set out to do album art or really even work with musicians at all. I really wanted to do more. First, I was really interested in doing like concept art, and I actually did a little bit of that on some indie projects. And I did stuff for like Fangoria magazine. So there was like publication, like publishing and things like that. I was kind of more interested after that, maybe book stuff, and then honestly, it just wound up being that like bands are just always in need of artwork. So uh, one of my first gigs was that the second Acetas album that preceded Eden Trough, which was False Peace, and that was in 2020. And they started off basically just being like, "Hey, can you license out a couple of your pieces to us?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I mean, why not?" But I hadn't really been working with bands at the time. Here's my cat, by the way. Um, I hadn't really been working with bands at the time, so um, it was kind of my first thing, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I definitely didn't charge what I should have charged, which is a whole thing. Learning how to do that over time is
Can only imagine.
it's a very challenging thing because you don't know how to value your own stuff. Um, but you never really grab it, you never really grasp it until you're undervalued, and then you realize what your stuff is worth based on how much time it took. Not saying that's based on that project because that project was incredible and it was the jumping off point for all sorts of stuff. And I'm great buds with Gage from Acetus and Travis and Zach, and they're all great guys. And we've had a continued relationship. So that was kind of my first album gig. I actually did. They had a couple things they licensed out, like his shirt designs too, but it was mostly album stuff, single cover, album cover. I should have grabbed that. It's like sitting over there.
So you started with like magazines.
Yeah, yeah, that was it. It wasn't really. I actually started with a film company, which I'm not gonna name because the process was so horrible, and I don't want to call specific people out.
Yeah,
Um, but it
rightfully
was
so.
yeah. Like I know what my very first gig was. If it so happens, it's not I had friends in I still have friends who work in bad taste video, and it's not you guys. I promise, it's someone else. But yeah, I wanted to do more like film and book publications and magazines because I thought like, well, it wasn't like I thought that's where the money was, but it's like I was constantly like mailing stuff out to people. I was just spam emailing various companies and publishers and all that stuff. So, and it just most of it ended up being to no avail. But then once I did like one album cover, that it just people started coming to me. And that's like nowadays, I don't really have to reach out to people. It's kind of more just, well, it just kind of so happens when I don't have work comes to me. So that's a blessing nowadays. But again, it's the way that works with networking through musicians. It's like, well, bands are always looking at other bands because they're enthusiasts of their own craft. And it's like, hey, that's a cool band. Who did that cover? Okay, it's this guy. Let's go hire that guy. So that's really just how it works. Nowadays, I know social media is kind of buggy, especially like Instagram, algorithms are weird, but There's still that word of mouth factor, I feel like. And that started from that first cover, False Piece, um, for
Yeah.
Acetas. And we've done so much since then. Half of it's not even revealed yet, but Eden Trough, that follow-up album was, I mean, that was a labor of love that took us like, I mean, I don't even know. I mean, since then, it's about 3 year break in between, or 4 year break. But it finally came out and seems to be doing pretty well. So I'm glad people are digging it. So definitely one I would check out for anyone listening. Eden Trough.
Hell
Um,
yeah, man. And it's been
yeah,
so awesome to like follow your career and stuff because like, to see all these new collaborations and stuff. And you have such a unique style, so I can see why a lot of people would see an album art and be like, whoa, I want that
thank
on my
you.
piece. At what point in your like artistic journey did you pinpoint like your own style? Because you have such a unique like style of
Yeah.
art.
Um, well, like, I would say, I mean, I'm sure most artists would say it's hard to pinpoint, but actually, like, I kind of think it isn't hard for me to pinpoint because there was basically through I mean, any artist is going to have their style regardless of medium, but really like what drove what I do nowadays is my mixed media process and how I develop and just how I develop images really because I most of the time nowadays I do merch digitally but uh when I started experimenting, this was a long time ago at this point. I think I started experimenting with the technique I use now in like 2018, um 2017, 2018, something like that. But yeah, no, I started messing around with this technique called monoprinting, which is uh, if you go on my Instagram, you'll see me. There's like every video I have, I'm doing it, but it's basically a printing process where a lot of people will use like oil ink and stuff, which technically gets you a better result, but I like the randomness of acrylics. So I use acrylics and I basically just paint on a sheet of plexiglass and I have a sketch beforehand that I'm kind of tracing over. But I'm kind of trying to be expressive with the acrylics and how I paint it on. Um, but you paint on this glass and then you press the paper to it and you just keep doing that with all the various colors you want to use. Kind of hard to thing to explain unless you see it, but again,
Yeah.
if you're listening and you check out my Instagram, I don't know if you've seen those
I
videos,
have,
but
yes.
yeah, cool.
Really cool
So
process.
thank you. Yeah, and what I found is like people are actually very interested in that process too. So that's why I started making videos. Actually, Iron Jungle was the first one I made. I didn't actually the video didn't actually come out until later, hence why the quality is slightly different from the ones that precede it. But um that process ended up just driving kind of the randomness of my style. Like I do have a very tightness I have a tightness to what I do, but it's this push and pull of unpredictability that I like. And again, merch is different. You have to be a little more precarious with it to make sure it prints okay. But which is why I do it digitally. But with the traditional process, and I even put some digital stuff in there when I'm done and after I've scanned it in, because personally, I just think the best image you can create is what should be put out, and you shouldn't have to rely on, well, it's not real because it's, not fully traditional. Well, I don't really care. As long as it looks good, that's what I care
Hell
about. But I'd say
yeah.
about 80 to 90% of it is the traditional process. So I do that and I do all this acrylic. So you end up with this multicolored or not, I guess, foundation of this kind of this very textural, uh, almost random looking, again, foundation of what the image is. And then over that, I just go with like colored pencils and I just tighten up all the details. So uh, it is this push and pull of like, well, I start with a sketch, I get the sketch to be tight, I send it to the client, they approve it. Then after that, I kind of undo it with this random mixed media process. Then I tighten it again. with colored pencils, and then I scan it in and tighten things a little bit digitally. Because sometimes when I work with reflective paint, it doesn't scan very well, which is my fault. I don't have to do that. But um, yeah, I would say that like while it's not 1,000% a style thing specifically, it has driven a lot of the looks of what I do now. So when you see that really kind of bizarre textural stuff, that's what that is. And some examples you can see it better on others because there's areas that I like to leave less tight, and then there's areas I can tighten up more with details. And it just depends on the project on how specific and how you know, how I guess naturalistic I want things to look. But
Yeah.
yeah, and in digitally too. I mean, I say I do like merch digitally, but it is kind of the same process because I have a bunch of textures that I've made through the same process, both on the paper I use. There's one just of the raw paper I use. So if you see a lot of like horizontal or vertical lines in my um, digital designs, it's just a scan of the paper that I use with all my others.
Oh.
So I'll
Okay.
do that, and then I'll reveal those in certain areas, and then I'll tighten. And of course, I have like monoprint textures that I also put in there, and then I tighten those details. So you have separate color layers, but it's through the same process in a way. So it still retains that look a little bit, but but regardless, it's always going to have that stamp on it just because I'm doing it, just as someone like, Mark Riddick, and his designs, he's going to have, his stuff's always going to look like his stuff. And, you know,
Yeah.
uh, that's just one artist. First artist who makes sick merch that I could think of. It's always going to be that guy.
Yeah, yeah, great, great artist. Now, I'm just curious because this is something I can't really even fathom. What's it like being an artist like that? And then, it's one thing sending your art out to a band or sending it, to a merch place, but it's another thing going to a record store and be like, holy shit, this is my art, in the record store, seeing your art on shirts. I can't imagine being at like a Ghost concert and seeing people walk by with your merch and be like, they have no idea who I am.
Yeah,
What was it? What was your first
honest.
reaction to seeing your merch, like, or just one of the albums you did in the flesh?
I mean, it's pretty darn cool. I live fairly rural, so I'm not around a lot of people. So, and the closest city to me is pretty small city. So, um, uh, well, I guess the major city I live closest to is Savannah, Georgia, but that's about an hour away. So,
Okay,
yeah, and
dang.
I'm about 3 hours away from Atlanta, but I still go to shows in Atlanta sometimes when I can. Um, but it is really cool. I mean, like one time, even so, the town I live closest to is Statesboro, Georgia, and I saw someone wearing one of my Ghost shirts at a movie theater, and I was just like, this isn't even at a concert. This is just like I'm going to a movie, and there's someone wearing one of my designs, and it's like that's it was very cool, especially because again, I'm just like not around a ton of people all the time. So when you see that, it's definitely special. But or
Yeah.
when most of the time it's not even seeing it in public, it's just that the band will send me the album and it's like, oh, it feels so good to see this in person after working so long and hard on it. And especially just with all the road bumps that happen with putting an album out along the way. Merch is obviously faster, but um yeah, very cool. It's
Yeah.
it's definitely awesome. It doesn't happen to me probably as much as it happens to people who live in more populated areas, but when I make it out to Atlanta, sometimes I'll see it, and it's pretty awesome. So,
Really cool,
uh,
man.
yeah, no, so it's not like, and the record store I go to in Savannah, Graveface Records, I don't know if I've seen one of my covers there, but I'm hoping one of these days. I'm working on it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, some record stores, not all of them are metal. Some of them are just like old hippies, who are just kind of reselling old
Yeah.
collections, but give it time, you
Yeah,
know?
they're a cool label. They're a cool store too. Because I mean, the guy who runs it also runs Terror Vision, which is a soundtrack label, as well as they put out they distribute Blu-rays and stuff of like cult movies and things like that. So I'm hoping to swing something with them eventually. That would be really cool because they always have cool like covers and stuff. So
Yeah, so you seem like you're just open to like anything, really. Like, would you ever do like maybe even like a horror movie poster for like a film? Like you're just
yeah,
completely open to,
I mean,
yeah?
and I have too. That when I started out, a buddy of mine, Rocco Zevenbergen, he runs Bad Taste Video, which is like this very kind of I'd liken it to something like Trauma, but even more DIY, I would say. And I helped do some concept art for uh I think it was their debut feature called I Need You Dead, and I did the poster for that.
Cool.
Yeah, and then I did a concept poster for their next feature they're working on now. So, which I had to do the entire thing in negative black and white, which was like a whole weird thing. But
Like, why
yeah, what
not?
that yeah, oh yeah. I should have just done it in black and white and then flipped it digitally, but I don't know why I did that. Oh, you never know why you do some things looking back, but
For
that was
sure.
another instance where I was visiting some family in Oregon, and he was visiting as well, and they were doing a screening of I Need You Dead at the Clinton in Portland, and I got to go and I got to see some of my friends, which was cool because I never see anybody. Um, but it's like, having the poster there, like on the marquee, and like getting to go and see like the creature I designed, it was a cool feeling. So I'd love to do that stuff again eventually. I just need to get film people who are really into metal and stuff like that to, check out my stuff. It's actually really cool. Something that was pretty neat is one of the producers of Blumhouse. He Ryan Turek. I don't want to misspeak, but I think he was one of the one people responsible for getting like there was a ghost song in one of the recent uh Halloween movies,
Yeah.
and I
Hunter's
had put
Moon.
out, yeah, Hunter's Moon, and I had put out a recent ghost design, and he DM'd me personally asking where he could find the shirt, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, you know.
That's
So you never
sick.
know. Absolutely, like movies would be really cool. One thing I'm a big fan of is like haunted attractions. I always go to Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando every year. I just came back 2 days ago from it, so their merch is usually really cool. I'd love to do like merch designs for them slash work on stuff for them. So that's honestly something else that is definitely. And I know the guy who runs Horror Nights is a huge Ghost fan. So I just need it to line up.
You got your in.
There's so many of those things where it's like, I know I could get this to happen. I just need to
Yeah.
make those pieces fit. That's like, with Brewhouse, the brewery that I just started working with on the bottles. This is my first one. I just did a second one that's not out yet, but one of my best buds that I just grew up with. He started, he's a brewer and he was working on another brewery, but he started working with them, and I had always admired their branding, and it's like, well, I brew all their beer, so you want me to just talk to the guy who runs it? We can make this happen. And it did. So, you know,
You have such an insane resume, and you're what, like 27?
yeah, 27.
All right, I'm 26, so it's
Well,
always
there you go.
weird. Yeah, it's always weird talking to someone like around my age on this because I'm so used to talking to like middle-aged like metalheads on there.
Same. Yeah,
Um,
same.
but and I know you've done some podcast covers too, and I definitely want to talk to you about that after this episode because I think I'm due for a new cover. Um,
Hit me
but
up.
yeah, we'll totally talk for sure.
Totally.
But yeah, man, so Ghost, that's a big thing. It's so crazy because you've done so much and there's still so much more, in your career that you can, go off and do. And who knows, some of the people you'll collaborate with. I just want to know, how do you define, or is there a moment in your career that you look at as your big break as an artist?
It's weird because like you never feel like you're really there, even when you maybe have done things that are obviously like the ghost stuff is. I recognize that that's big. But it's like even after you do that, I think this goes to show with anything, like this is just a life thing. Every time you reach a goal, you're like, okay, I got it, great, but like there's still that void you need to fill. So like you never know what's next. And I'm always like, well, what's next? And as a full-time freelancer, my wallet needs to be like, okay, what's next? Like get it going. Because, you know, uh paying bills off of a very unpredictable career is tough. But I would definitely say, like, when I first started out, I had gotten something in Fangoria, which was like, for someone within the first year of working, it was a big deal to me. And I did a couple things for them. It's been a few years now, but like they do their annual Chainsaw Awards, and I did the artwork for that for a couple years that got reused. Um, they don't use it anymore, but it was cool. That was a big deal for me, but I wouldn't necessarily call it like a huge break, but it was the first like major gig I got. And it was kind of just a reminder more than anything to myself that like, okay, like you've managed to do that with very little to show. So it's kind of more than anything, it's just a reassurance thing to myself that I can kind of keep going. Um, but I mean, the ghost stuff obviously was, that was something that it honestly caught me by surprise. But um, you look back and you look and see all this things you've worked hard on, and you're like, well, I shouldn't be surprised. But because when I talk about like my career, I never fully have a grasp on it. It's just like, all right, just did that. What's the next thing? It's hard to like look back and like because I've only been doing this a few years. It's like I think this is my fifth year doing this full time. Not even really full time, but like this is definitely it's my fifth year as an illustrator, like doing work. So
Mhm.
almost sixth, but it might be sixth. I don't know. It's hard to even say when I started. It's because you get a gig every now and then when you start, and but yeah, no, I mean the ghost stuff was a big deal because I've been a big fan. And I mean, yeah, like people could say like, "Whoa, that's huge," but like more than anything, it was just kind of a personal goal because I'd been a fan of them really since their beginning. I was in high school and like Opus Eponymous and Infestissimum. I always loved those albums. And I still like everything they do. But it was again, it's a surprise thing. It always catches you off guard because I had pitched a few designs to them, to their merch team, and they got approved. But what I didn't know is that they were gonna immediately like make a cover out of one of them. Um, and yeah, and the fact that it was like I don't know. I mean, if I check Spotify,
Yeah, it's the
uh,
top stream song. Um,
yeah, I mean it's still at number one, which is crazy to me. That like I kind of just said, here's this design, and then they picked it up and then they were like, "Oh yeah, we want to put this on a single cover for a song that already existed, grant you." But that whole like TikTok thing blew up Mariana Cross, so it was really like happening without me knowing it, and then it had already happened, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize this was such a thing." So, there was definitely that moment where that dropped and I was like, "Okay, like I feel like I finally have a handle on what I'm doing." Because there's a personal validation to it. It's not like, oh, people will love my stuff. I never really know how I'm doing in this job, and that's something that I can always look back to and validate. It's why like I try and get a hold of all the shirts I've designed so I can put them all together and be like, hey, like I can pinpoint areas in when I've developed and like say, wow, like look at that compared to a couple years later, that and like how I've improved and how I've do things differently. And so, it's hard to pinpoint a moment, but that's definitely a big one.
yeah, for sure. So that's you just kind of just reached out to the merch team, like just cold
Yeah.
called pretty much.
Yep.
Just
Yep. I hadn't cold called in a long time, but it was like, all right, this is This is overdue. And luckily, I really like the people I work with there, and we've done a lot since. So there's still a massive body of ghost stuff people haven't seen, but which is exciting. It's always exciting to keep working with them. And they have other artists on their roster that I'm excited to um, neither confirm nor deny. I've gotten to do some stuff for. So uh, it's just it's exciting, and I um yeah, it's something that took me by, I guess it shouldn't have taken me by surprise looking back because of how much I had worked on up until that point. And but yeah, no, that definitely has like directed a lot more people to me. But it's weird because, I mean, within especially like the underground and just metal in general, I mean, there's a lot of mixed opinions on that band. They're definitely a more accessible band. That potentially a lot of people who are not metal fans will like. But there's a lot of metal fans that do like them, and then there's a lot of metal fans who talk a lot of shit. So,
Yeah.
uh, but what I think is cool is that I can do both. I can work with like underground death thrash metal bands and at the same time be working on stuff with them. Because I just don't care about that stuff. I don't really care about whether someone is like 100 people know about a band or 1 million people know about a band. I just don't think it's important. It's like whether you like it or not. There's an audience
Exactly.
for it.
I agree 100%, man. It's all about the music. And I actually like, I'm a pretty big defender of Ghost. I just have a really big issue with, it's like the same people who shit on Ghost are the ones, who've seen Kiss 200 times. It's like you
Yeah,
realize Ghost did what Kiss did, but better, It's like go
yeah,
listen to Lick It Up again. It's like, are you kidding me, man?
yeah,
At least
yeah,
their pop stuff actually like is like in character with the band and like is a really good evolution of their own sound and is like a
yeah.
really good way of like making it mainstream but not completely selling out, I think. And
I
still like
agree.
maintaining their specific sound. Where Kiss literally did the exact same thing, but in my opinion, a little more scummy and a little more, selling out.
Yeah.
Both I love both bands, don't get me wrong, but
Oh, I agree. My first
yeah.
concert was Kiss in middle school. So,
Hell yeah.
but yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people will say someone is selling out just because they're making music people like. And I just personally, like, I don't care. I don't care if they even like fully went away from like a heavy sound. I wouldn't even really care as long as it's good. So, I mean, and it's the funny thing is like people say they're not metal, and it's like, okay, well, they still have heavy riffs, like they still have heavy elements to their music. So whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter as long as you like it, and I like it. So, and a lot of other people like it, and therefore I get work. So, I
Yeah,
mean, at the end of the
well,
day, I hate to be like that, but like I don't know, it's at the end of the day, it's like who's laughing, it's
yeah. Well, and you can get work and enjoy the music at the same time,
yeah,
And it's like, I think I kind of like the idea of like each album is like very unique and on its own.
I
And
agree.
even like the new record like has a lot of metal elements to it. So like to call
Yeah.
it to people to say it's a pop album is like, come on, are you kidding me, man? It's like I
Yeah.
know pop albums and that's not even close to it. Personally, I know I even have like kind of like a metal podcast and this actually was
Yeah.
supposed to be a doom metal podcast.
Hmm.
But I did, but apparently doom metal people, they hate doing interviews or any kind of
Yeah.
podcast. But I personally, I don't think there's any, people say they listen to everything and they don't really mean it. I think
No.
other than K-pop, I really am open to like most and pretty much every genre of music. I think there's something to be loved in every genre. And I think the more
Yeah.
genres you take in, as a listener, the more you can appreciate some of your favorite bands and albums and whatnot. And I
Yeah.
wish metalheads kind of were more open, but
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like even when
whatever.
there's more accessible like death metal albums, I think people like death metalers will get mad that it's like that it's I don't know that it doesn't sound like shit. You know what
Yeah.
it's like I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
It's like I don't know if you don't like the new Gate Creeper album just because it's like more melodic and stuff like that. It's like, well, they wanted to make a more melodic album, so they made a more melodic album. I mean, you know what? It's better. So
Yeah,
like
man. I agree, man. And same with Blood Incantation, where like, they
yeah.
got a ton of people who are like, fucking hipster metal. It's like, it's I
I don't
don't know,
even know how to
man.
describe that. Like, I mean, what even is hipster metal? It's just I think they're just making the music they want to make, and if people like it, they like it, and if they don't, they don't. So
Yeah,
I
just
don't
because
know.
it's unique, it's like I don't know, man. I feel like people are like the whatever the whole Paul Bailoff thing was, it's kind of turned into like this really like fucked up perspective, I think.
Yeah. Well, and
But
then there's a lot of things of like people will, I know, especially like, I don't know, black and death metal fans will look at bands that are a lot more visually inclined, you know. I mean, I guess Ghost is an example, but not even necessarily within that, but people who use like pageantry and have more to their imagery, and the imagery is a big part of the sound. Like, I mean, again, like Imperial Triumphant, that's a good example. Um, I don't I've always like I see people who are like, well, it should be about the music. It's like, okay, well, it is about the music. It's just that there's an extra dimension to it, and I don't see why that hinders the music at all. I've always kind of thought, well, that gives me more to look at, you know, it gives me
yeah.
more to appreciate about it. Like Portal is another example that's always done that well. Um, and you know, I don't know. I never get that. Well, it should just be about the music. It's like, but it doesn't have to be. And I think opens up a lot more doors if it isn't just about the music. Not that that's a problem. You know, I mean, I know a lot of people who are, you know, they don't really the visuals aren't much of a thing, and that's fine. But, you know, I mean, if I
Yeah.
have my way about it, it will be more of a thing, especially if I get hired by those bands. But, you know, yeah.
Yeah, and and people who also like gatekeep corpse paint and stuff. It's like I don't know,
Yeah.
man. It doesn't really with Kiss existing, it's just
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
make any
no.
sense. It's like and people were that was the big thing with Ghost, it's like they shouldn't be. It's like literally Kiss,
Yeah, and Alice Cooper and
Alice
like, you know,
Cooper, great
Arthur
example.
Brown and I like
Yeah.
all those. It's just wearing makeup is not technically has nothing to do with your music. So it's funny too, because you always think that people are over that stuff, and it's like, all right, we're past that. And then you always see it happening in real time still, and then it's like, oh my God, you know.
It's a headache.
So yeah, usually it just ends up being more about like, you know, queer slurs and things like that.
Yeah.
But like people usually just end up being either really racist or homophobic or something, and that's usually what it boils down to. Or misogynist. You know, like
Unfortunately,
people will
yeah.
shit on like Holder and stuff just because, it's a female fronted band, and it's like, all right. And they'll say it's not about that, but it absolutely is about that, you
100%
know?
is Crypta, another
Yeah,
unfortunate,
yeah. People were really bad to Mirka, I remember when she started out, and
really.
oh yeah, I mean cool thing about her is she's very much like her own thing now. It's not just like the black metal sound. Her last album was, I think, very just its own sound. It wasn't like one thing or another, so that was cool. I know I'm excited. She's doing backup vocals for King Diamond on his tour, and oh, that's so
Cannot
cool.
wait. I'm seeing King Diamond on Halloween in Boston. So fucking excited,
Well,
man.
that'll be the tour, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I saw
Yeah.
Merciful Fate for the first time like a couple years ago. Fucking, I don't
Wow.
know how him and Rob Halford, like how the hell, do they
Yeah.
sound so good still?
Yeah, I'm bummed I missed that. That was like I had three different shows I was going to within like a 2 week span, and that landed in it, and so I didn't go. But
Damn.
I was like, I should have stuck it out. I should have gone.
They played like all of Melissa. It was like fucking incredible.
Yeah, that's
They'll come
awesome.
back. They'll come back.
Yeah,
I'm curious about this. Is there like a dream artist you would like to work for? If you can work for any artist ever?
yeah. King
King
Diamond,
Diamond?
King
Yeah.
Diamond, Merciful Fate. I know Merciful Fate has a new record that's coming out. I know King has a new record that's coming out. Like, just let me do something. I don't care if it's like an afterthought. Just let me make a shirt design. Let me do something. I don't care.
Are you gonna
But
cold
yeah,
call?
yeah.
I
You know
think
what?
that's the move, man.
I've tried. I've tried cold calling their people, but to no avail. I guess I just got to do it again.
Well, I think in time, you're
Yeah,
definitely your resume is already incredible, and it's just going to keep growing. So I
yeah.
think in time,
But
it's
meanwhile,
just
like there's some folks I'm gonna be unveiling some stuff in the next couple of weeks to a month. And there's some people who I reached out to like years ago and they just, never got back to me. But then like 2 years later they were like, oh yeah, like yeah, can you do something for us? So it's like it does happen. You think it's
yeah.
like whatever, they ignored me, but they didn't. They just kind of kept you in their pocket and yeah. I know it's cool though because like with the advent of like doing stuff for Ghosts, they have Global Merch Services has a lot of people under their belt. Like they have Anthrax and Slayer and like I know Slayer like isn't really together anymore, but they still put merch out and I could still theoretically do a Slayer design. So, you
Yeah.
know, I don't
And
really
give
care
that
what
time.
this I don't really care what the status of the band is. They're still putting designs out. So, if I can be one of those, that's all that matters to me,
Yeah,
but
your
luckily
merch, your art would
that's
look
kind of a
so
net
good on
point.
Slayer. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're seeing, Still Ghost is kind of like the big band that I've worked with, but I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty open-ended. I mean, they have Celine Dion on their shit. So like for some reason if they were like, "Hey, we need a Celine Dion design," I'd do it, man.
That'd be sweet, just to like really expand the net of that resume. Why not?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, I think that'd be cool, working with especially like non-metal artists. I think that'd be awesome.
that'd be a whole different approach for you,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Because like I feel like your style alone is already very like metal centric,
Yeah.
regardless of the design itself.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
so it's definitely a situation where, I'd have to adapt, but I don't know. I mean, stranger things have happened, so
Yeah, yeah. Good challenge.
yeah, I agree, I mean, I never really want to like pigeonhole myself. So if they've got a brief for me and, there's always a way to do it. It's just a matter of how to get there. So,
Yeah, did I? I'm not sure if I asked what your most difficult piece was to
ooh.
make.
Um, that's a good question. I would probably say
Earthwork seems like it'd be a
it was
tough one.
tough. I will say
Yeah.
that's an example of where like it was supposed to be simpler than Iron Jungle and it ended up being way more complicated. Not in a bad way, it was just more challenging than I had initially planned for. Especially because I oftentimes will just say screw perspective. Like like drawing perspective and things like that, it won't really matter as much the way I set up my compositions. But that was one where it's like it's a very rigid, I mean, it's 1 point perspective only, but like it's a very rigid and exact planar perspective. So that ended up being very, very difficult. Um that and I mean I would definitely say that the Acetas stuff was tough, especially for the new album that just came out a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, really, just because there's so many pieces involved on it. The cover was one thing, and the cover took me a long, long time, but there was a lot of inner pieces that ended up being pretty tough as well. Because, I mean, I already forgot how many pieces we did for this, but it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so 7 pieces for this album. And a lot of them did not end up in the end initially how they started. So, and me working with my buddy Gage, he was like, okay, well, we have an idea for this song, so let's make the artwork for this song. And then afterwards, he was like, well, we've changed our mind and we don't want that to be associated with that song, so we need a new piece for that song. And that happened like 3 times in the process. So, granted, we'd been working on this album for years, so it was kind of a slow thing that it wasn't like hurry up and wait. But that'll oftentimes happen where it's like things will change during the process and you have to adapt, which
Yeah.
hopefully like I try to avoid that, but it sometimes you can't, and that's okay. Um, Herakleion, they just put out Necroverse, an EP that's pretty awesome. I haven't gotten the copies of it yet. They sent it out, but I just haven't they haven't arrived yet. So, but that was a cover that I definitely thought was going to be more simple than it was, and then it turned out to be pretty complex. It doesn't look super complex, but it just compositionally it was not easy. There was a lot of redrawing in the sketch phase, and um but ultimately, it just you end up liking it more by the time it comes out because of that. Or not, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I usually do.
Total, especially with the amount of time and effort put into it, I can definitely see why it's be like
Yeah.
finally, and you can
Yeah.
really, really appreciate that shit.
Yeah. You don't always appreciate it right when it's done because you're like, oh God, like I've been living with this for so long. I don't even know how it looks to an outsider. But they're usually like, okay, cool, awesome. But of course, I'm like, like, did I do this right? Did I do? Yeah, but then I take a week or a month away from it and I look back at it. I'm like, no, yeah, that it turned out maybe not always how I planned for it to, but it usually better because, there are things that happen along the way that inform that. So,
Yeah, for sure. And that's like with most, I think maybe every artist where it's like even bands where it's like they write a song, they're looking at every like 5 seconds, at it and they're listening to it a million times. And then by the time it's like fully mixed and mastered, they don't even have an opinion on it,
yeah, no,
because they've just focused on every little note on it where it's like, is this even a good song or not?
yeah,
So I can
yeah.
see how you can think that. Like even for me, man, like I do like like doing comedy and stuff. It's like,
Hmm.
writing a joke, you think it's like the best shit ever, and then you do it, and it's like, well, that sucked. And even the
I
other
feel
way
you.
around. Now I did
I believe
ask,
it.
I think I was talking to you about like your favorite artists and stuff. But do you have a definitive favorite album cover of all time?
Oh, that's hard to say. You know,
For me, I have to say,
yeah, go,
Rust
yeah.
in Peace. Rust in Peace. I just fucking love.
Oh
I
yeah,
love,
Ed Repka, you were
yeah, Ed
talking about, right?
Repka. We were
Yeah,
talking about him. I also love how albums are kind of like color coded, if that makes sense. In it, like where you have Peace Cells, red,
right.
Rust in Peace, Blue. I really like how there's like kind of themes, and a lot of your art kind of follows that as well, which I think is cool. But do you have like a favorite album art of all time,
Oh, I mean, it's just there's
or
so many
one of your
modes.
favorites?
There's so many modes. I mean, there's definitely ones I can think of off the top of my head. For example, maybe like honestly, one that I think is a little underrated is Them by King Diamond.
Yes.
I've always loved that album because it doesn't look like a metal cover. Like it looks, I mean, I don't know, it's just like a nice, it's just a painting of a house, So I've always loved that. It's so unassuming. And that's also just like that album is like my Bible. So
Yeah.
um it's just pure, it's like the campiest but like most sincere metal album at the same time. Um and there's definitely like obviously like How the Gods Kill is a big one because it's Giger and like you can't there's nothing bad to be said about Giger. I mean he's just the best. So
Amazing.
yeah, I mean and then of course like Vince Locke, who does Cannibal Corpse. Again, I was bringing that up earlier, but I've always loved Tomb of the Mutilated. That just the concept is like so
Insane.
vile and disgusting and great at the
Yeah.
same time. Um, but yeah, so there's definitely like artists. It's hard to always just pinpoint specific pieces. But yeah, I mean, those are some of the greats, obviously just the general body of Drew Struzan's work for Iron Maiden. Um, because or no, sorry, not Drew Struzan. Derek Riggs.
Yeah. Derek Riggs.
Drew Struzan is the movie poster guy.
Okay.
Derek Riggs, yeah. Although I think Drew Struzan did Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, if I'm correct. So that's one of my
Interesting.
Yeah, let me fact check
Yes.
that.
I did not know that,
Yeah.
if that's true. Sabbath does have some amazing
Yes.
album art. Some that's, famously like honestly, I know the Born
Yep.
Again cover. Okay,
Yeah,
confirmed?
it is Drew Struzan.
Cool.
That's one of my all-time favorite covers. Just, I mean, compositionally and the colors. I love, pink, and then there's the other side of it that's blue. Um, yeah, no, that's one of my all-time favorites, for sure.
For
So
me, this
yeah,
is a little bit controversial, but I love the Born Again cover
I
for
do
Sabbath.
too.
I
I do
love the
too.
contrast of colors on that.
Yeah, I do too. And I
Um,
think, but to me too, it's an image that sticks with you. So like, while I know the band has said they hate it and a lot of people don't like it, I've never really understood the criticism because when I think of Black Sabbath albums, that one always comes to mind because it's such an instant image. Where it goes to show sometimes the more simpler thing is the better thing. So,
yeah.
um, and that's a case where, clearly not a lot of people agree with us, but I'm on the same level with you there. I've always liked that one.
Well, this podcast is called Disturbing the Priest. So
Yeah, for sure.
I love that record so much. And I think it's Sabbath's most eerie. And I think that's like such a great example of art reflecting the sound, where
Yeah,
I think it's their eeriest cover, like just so scary.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess those are some kind of like examples of I mean, some of those are like obviously the Derek Riggs is so obvious because
So
anyone's going to
good.
bring that up.
Yeah.
Um but I mean, especially like more contemporary examples that because I always like to kind of do a little bit of both, but like Merald Van Hasterten, I always say that wrong, but he does all the Necrot covers. Uh
Nice.
and he
Yeah.
just I mean it's like I mean his style is just incredible to me and he's a big influence in a way that he does a lot of colored pencil like I do, but he also mixes that with a digital process. So whenever I saw him kind of talking about that or doing that, I was always like, well, it's not, just goes to show it's not such a sin to combine the two to a certain extent. And
Yeah.
then
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah, so he's a big one. And then of course Zabinyu and Bielak, who's like I feel like just contemporary album art, just I I hate to say he's the best, but like, he's just like the best. I mean the every obviously there's a tie-in with Ghost there, but like it's why it shocked me when I even did. I know it's just like a single cover or a compilation cover, but I was like, I never thought I would actually swing a Ghost cover because their covers are just so incredible, and I wouldn't want anyone other than him to do any covers for them. So, because the Impera cover is like just, I don't even
Insane. Insanely
like.
detailed.
Where do you go from there? I feel like every cover they put out, I'm like, how do you top this? And then
Yeah.
he does, and all the inner artwork because he always does inner artwork for each song, so it's like it's nauseating the amount of detail he puts in his stuff while still being really captivating images. Because
Especially when you buy the
sometimes,
vinyl,
oh yeah,
and you
yeah,
get
I
the
got
book.
they were very generous to me. They sent me a vinyl, so I have a copy of it over there, and it's just like, ugh. I mean, you can't even like. It's so hard sometimes when you get caught up in a lot of little details too, to still make it a compelling, um, strong image because you don't know what to look at. But he really manages to still with all those tiny. It makes me angry, when I look at it, which is why I love it. Uh, but he manages to put all those little details in there, and yet everything is so painstaking, and yet there's still such a strong, because he's a master of composition as well. So, there's still that strong imagery that is immediate. You want something to be immediate when you look at it. So you're not like just glazing over it, and he does that. So,
Yeah, well, you're saying, I know it's just a compilation, but that it's literally their most streamed song is your artwork. Like that's fucking massive, man. That's not like
yeah, no,
it's not like some little buried compilation. It's
no, I still don't know what I mean. They kind of put it out without even like ever saying anything, so I'm always like still like, what even is this?
so you found out about it. So what were you on Spotify one day and it just
Nah,
popped up?
The people I work with told me ahead of time. They were like, "Oh, also can like we want to use this as a, you know, single cover." So, and they were like, "That's really awesome." And I was like, "Yeah, that is really awesome. Like, thanks for telling me."
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
so crazy.
it was cool. Yeah. But
So
yeah,
cool.
no, that was just through yeah, they it was kind of a thing of like, well, they've done that with a few designs that I think were meant to just be merch designs. Like they just put out a compilation, Sam Dunn, who does a lot of their merch designs, where they finally put that song Zenith on it. It's like
Yes,
13
finally.
commandments or something, but I mean, just due to the way that it's like cropped and stuff, my guess is it was maybe supposed to be a merch design and then it ended up being a cover. So, but it's been known to happen. So, that doesn't make, I mean, it's, they still make for awesome covers. So, but I mean,
Oh yeah.
meanwhile, here I am, like, I just like the movie Caligula and I like Ghost. What if I made a Ghost Caligula design? And then here we are,
Here
you
we are.
know?
Well, even before this, man, like I was a massive fan of yours. We were talking about some of the some album art, some of the modern ones I like. Uh, the Outer Ones by Revocation.
Yeah.
That actually got me into the band because the monsters on it, the Lovecraftian imagery was
Yeah.
just so fucking cool. And it's like, I just love like monster and creature stuff on album art. And that was just like the ultimate, like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is this, man? And how the
It's
whole
good.
thing is a concept album too and kind of connects the art. I love that stuff
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah,
Um,
Dave has a really good eye for, artists, especially as they've evolved. Because like I love the Nether Heaven cover as well, because
yeah.
Paolo Girardi is another like undisputed master uh painter who works with so many bands, and you never mistake his work for anyone else's.
Yeah,
So
amazing.
it's like he did that Vastum cover for Patricidal Lust, and that's like one of my all-time favorites. But yeah, no, Revocation always has a cool eye. I know, especially even with their merch too. Like they have so many cool artists they work with. Like they worked with Jerry at Wormwalk on Instagram, if you follow him. Um, where he was like that weird cultist guy with like the one eye.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he
Cool.
does a lot of cool stuff, and he's like a traditional painter as well. So, uh, yeah, another unmistakable style, which who's one of my favorite contemporary artists, just because you never will mistake his work for anyone else's. He just did the new Mall cover as well. That's and I'm always shouting Jerry out, but yeah, Noxus. I don't know if you've gotten to this album by
Yes,
Noxus,
yeah, yeah,
Violence.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Great shit,
Violence
man.
Inherent in the System. Yeah, it's got that crazy cover with the skull where it just like wraps around the whole thing, and he hand lettered the title with like veins in the yeah. I could go on and on though. I mean, it's like there's so many artists nowadays, and luckily, like with social media, I've kind of and with especially like podcast platforms like this, I've gotten to speak to and get to know a couple of these artists, which is pretty cool. Including like people like Jerry, and then there's like folks like I was on a panel with a few people like Lucas at Shoggoth Kinetics on Instagram. He's such a cool guy. Caroline Harrison, she's amazing. I don't know. I could go on about the amount of artists I've kind of gotten to connect with in recent years, and it's very cool. So it's great to know that there's that community out there.
Yeah.
Lee, who does Heavy Art Talk on YouTube,
Yes.
he's a good friend now. Nowadays, like he's someone I go to shows with in Atlanta because he lives there. So whenever I make the trek out, it's a good time to hang with him. But yeah, so it's just cool to see the community kind of come together at times, especially when it's like we're kind of all on our own, I mean, it's not like we're working through like a company or a really hierarchy of any form. It's just sort of, well, we got to figure this all out for ourselves. So to know we kind of have each other's backs is really nice.
Yeah, which I guess is kind of a blessing and a curse, because it's
Yeah.
like you have complete freedom and stuff, but at the same time, like you have to figure everything out on
Yeah,
your own.
it's I mean, whether I'm 5 years in or 50 years in, I think I'm still never going to feel like I've truly figured out how it works. But I
Yeah.
also think when you resign to that, as long as you know what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, and you understand kind of your worth, as long as you have those things and that comes with time, but like nowadays I do think I'm at a point where I know what I tolerate, what I don't tolerate, and um I know how to charge, which is like something I didn't know early on. Um you have those kind of fundamentals as long as you have those to stick to. And beyond that, if you just resign to the fact that you don't really fully understand everything, you just get used to it, you know?
Yeah.
Because
For
every
sure,
band
man.
works different. A lot of bands, like it could be their first time working with artists and they don't really understand how it works. So things may come across like either maybe disrespectful or rude, but like they might not even know they're doing that. So you kind of have to, while you understand yourself and how you work, you also kind of have to have that grace, where maybe they don't always know they're doing that. So if you just have a good conversation with people and you understand each other and you come to a mutual understanding, it usually all works out. Unless they're
Yeah.
trying to rip you off, which I've had people who are like, I've tried to work with them and they won't sign my contracts, and it's like, sorry, I'm not working with you. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
which good, because there's a
yeah.
lot of people out there who just do not give a fuck about artists and stuff or
No, you
you
can't be
know,
taken advantage of. That's the
yeah.
thing.
And it happens, unfortunately.
It still does. And no matter how friendly certain like communities and like you may really like a band and something, but then you like work with them and then things get weird and it taints your view of them a little. You can't help but have it be like that. But luckily I haven't really run into that. I mean, anything where there has been issues, it's really just mostly people not understanding how things work. And it's just ignorance. It's not really malice. So
Yeah. It seemed like you were talking from personal experience for a second.
I definitely have some. Not maybe not as much as some of my peers who have dealt with some pretty brutal stuff, but I don't know. For the most part, I just try and be really like I try and talk person to person, and I'm not like I don't. I try to be reasonable within reason. Try not to be uh, you know, I don't know. Just if you're not a dick, people will usually not be a dick to you. And then if they are a dick, you can say, "Hey, you're being a dick." So,
Do you have like any pet peeves in album art? Because I'll see some art and then like for example, I think it's like on a Sabaton album, like the proportions are way off on a soldier where he's punching a guy and his arms like it's like I don't think an arm could be that long. And
yeah. Well,
and I'll see that in other albums too, where it's like I don't think that head is that that right size on a person. Like just sometimes proportions are way off. Do you have any issues like that, where like you have a little pet peeves or some issues with some art out there?
yeah. You mean just like in personal taste?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely to kind of bounce off of what you're saying is like if there's that proportional stuff, there's always the line that you have where it's like, is this deliberate or is it just done poorly? Because I'm not exactly sure what album you're talking about because I'm not really I haven't really explored Sabaton, but
Me neither.
yeah, no, but no shade to them, but like
Of course.
you can definitely tell uh you can definitely tell at times when it's like you can tell when someone tried to do something right and they did it wrong versus if you just kind of if you can deliberately abandon some rules and when you know the rules, there's always the thing people say of like when you know the rules then you know how to break them, but if you break the rules before understanding them it just looks bad. um so like yeah,
Uh-huh.
if you're gonna like proportionally mess stuff up, do it to the nth degree, make it crazy, make it look like you did it on purpose and make it a style as opposed to like, well, you always get the excuse of like sometimes there are less experienced artists and they're like, well, I just drew that hand wrong because it's my style. And it's like, is it your style or did you not use reference or did you not like did you not do it deliberately? Is it an excuse or is it or was it intentional? And oftentimes usually it's intentional, but sometimes at the same time I kind of like when there's shitty album art. So like I don't know, there's a breath of fresh air. You'll look at some covers like oh God. Gosh, I don't even know what to.
For bad art, I can name a couple.
Yeah, go shoot.
Um, Handsome Beast. There's an album called Bestiality. Um,
Well, I feel like that's
I'm
just
I'm not. It's actually a pretty iconic record. It's the album cover is this. I believe it's the singer, and he's naked and he's on a farm and he's holding a pig.
ah
And with the other hand, he has his hand on a sign that says "Don't feed the animals." It's kind of like a really fucked up version of the Peace Sells cover. Uh,
I gotcha.
but that's a famous one. There's definitely a few others. I think there's an Iron Maiden one where they were getting to like CGI.
Oh
Um,
yeah, Dance of Death.
Dance of Death. That's what it is. Yeah,
Like it's hilarious because there are some covers from that era that I kind of love the shitty CGI.
me
Like
too.
nowadays, there are so many visual artists that just do fine arts with 3D modeling and stuff, and I love that stuff. So, but it's funny when you go back and it's like I feel like a lot of people when AI started becoming a thing, which I guess if I could say ultimate pet peeve, it's just having an AI cover and using
Yeah.
AI in general. But I mean that's obvious coming from our earlier conversation. But because I would rather you have a stock photo than have a AI cover personally. So
Yeah,
it's like for
I
example,
agree.
I'm a big fan of Grindstone Records and like Bloody Keep, Old Nick, and Curtain Wall, and like the Rats of Black Death cover for Bloody Keep is just a kind of blurry photo of two rats, and this is my favorite album that's come out all year. So like I would rather you do this and own it because he does. It's like if this is gonna be your album cover, be proud of it.
But there's a
It's
charm in
on
that. Yeah.
there's a boldness to choosing to deliberately do that. And that's what he does. So I really appreciate that. And I would take a million of those, even just a cover that's really poorly, because I really made, I would just say that that is a deliberate choice. If you hire someone and they're just not a good artist and they make a really shitty album cover, I would still rather that 1,000 times more than than like an AI cover, just because like I don't know, there's a lack of care. I would say like one of my all-time favorite covers. I don't know if it's even bad, but it is certainly crude. There's a crudeness to it. Is Shark Attack by Wehrmacht. Um, is the guy and he's like two guns and he's riding sharks, and it's like it's crazy. I used to have a shirt of that because they played in, I think they're from Portland. I can't remember, but I used to see them all the time when I was in high school, and I had a shirt of that, and I don't have it anymore. And it's one of those that I'm like so pissed I got rid of.
That's
Um,
funny.
but yeah, no, that's definitely a yeah. Just I mean,
For sure.
AI in general is a pet peeve because you bring up the Dance of Death. I have a soft spot for some of that stuff. People say nowadays like I've seen people say nowadays that like shitty AI covers nowadays are gonna age like those did, like the shitty CG covers. But I almost disagree. Like I agree how they're not good, but work was still put into them. So like they're not good covers, but like I do kind of love them for their existence, and it's a time capsule that's a lot more charming than just a computer doing all your work for you. So
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I don't think it's that at all. Where it's so like a similar thing, where like you're
yeah,
saying, literally just a computer doing it for you, and there's no
yeah,
real decision of how something's gonna look. Or
yeah,
even
and
bad covers, at least they're choosing a bad cover, you
yeah,
know?
and meanwhile, draining an entire city's water supply and electricity and stealing from a bunch of artists. So,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
so there's that element. But yeah, I love that. Like Dance of Death, and then you have like some of those monstrosity covers. where there's just like it's like on a planet and there's just like floating multicolored eggs, and it's like I I guess we're doing that, you know. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of love that stuff in a weird way, just because it's different, you know. I mean, people may clown on it, but
It's
it
unique.
is it is. I mean, I remember it, you know. So
Like, yeah, and another one I like, the band Cold Weather, I believe, where
oh, the polar
the
bear,
polar bear. Yeah.
Messiah, extreme cold weather.
Yeah,
That
extreme
honest,
cold weather, that's what it's called.
yeah, honestly, one of my all-time favorite covers, if we're being honest. Just
Yeah.
because again, they're like, screw it, just a picture of a polar bear. There's a lot of great art out there, but sometimes a lot of it blends together. And when you just do that, it's like, you know, and that's another thing. I've talked about this just on other platforms, but I can't emphasize it enough. You know, there are bands nowadays who will be like, well, we can't afford an artist, so we're not going to pay for an artist. So we're going to use, that's why we'd use an AI cover. Um, Not true. You can get away with doing a lot of stuff without even paying anybody. I mean, the amount of public domain imagery out there that can work for a cover that can suit you specifically, it's almost endless. You know,
Yeah.
you can literally get a Leonardo da Vinci cover for free rather than using AI. You know what I mean? Like these are the masters that we all look up to, and you can use their art for free, you know?
Yeah.
One band who I love, who does it really well, is Departure Chandelier, the black metal band that is all Napoleon themed. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is one of my favorite albums this year, Satan Soldier of Fortune. But they've developed a they've developed a consistent visual language just through the use of. I mean, they have good like design and like logo work and stuff too, but they've developed a visual language just through working with, you know, existing public domain images. I mean, this is a Angra painting. He's one of the it's ironic actually because Angra is one of the masters that the paper brand, the paper I use is named after. Kansan Angra uh is the paper I use for all my stuff. So there you go. Literally the guy who that's named after painted this cover, and all these years later they're using it, but like it's one of the sickest covers this year and it already
Great. Yeah.
existed. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And you
I
could
don't know.
also do what Cannibal Corpse did with well, where they took a piece of art and just zoomed in,
Yeah.
all the way, where you can like get creative with it and just take something that's public domain,
Yeah.
zoom in and get a cool collagey kind of look. And
Yeah, you know, it's
so many options today.
oh yeah. Unlike the Hell Awaits cover that's just ripped off Mobius art that's
Yeah.
traced over a really bad painting of flames. Even though I
Oh,
kind of liked
seriously?
that cover. Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's all just Mobius comics that have been traced over, and then there's like some flames drawn in the background. And it's
Interesting.
like I kind of love that cover even though it's terrible. But yeah, no, it's yep, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere like they had to do it overnight or something, and they just had a guy like trace a bunch of stuff over a wash of orange and red. So
Yeah, a lot of 80s like thrash metal covers can be very hit or miss, I think. Like even
yeah.
some of the art can be very rushed or very, one of our bandmates, brother like draws shit, so we just took one of his
Yeah,
drawings.
I know.
That's
My
what it
favorite we were talking about Peter Steele earlier. My favorite thrash band, my favorite thrash album of all time is just Carnivore by Carnivore.
yeah.
It's like I don't know. There's it's just my number one, but I've always loved that just because it's just. I mean, the original cover. I like the new cover that's just like the dog's mouth too, but like I've always loved that cover that's just like their logo like scratched through the um it's just their like logo scratched onto the or their name scratched into the cover.
Yeah.
And again, it's simple, but it's kind of crude, but like it's done in such a cool way that yeah.
Yeah, there's like some really good like bad thrash art. Like I like Flotsam's first album, and the first Whiplash album, where it's the
Oh, you mean
guys,
with the guy getting grabbed
yeah,
by
the guy's
the
head and the metal, the robot hands like grabbing his head,
yeah,
and his
oh God.
face just looks very weirdly drawn.
Yeah, Thrash has a lot of just fun, or it's like Obviously, oh, the big one, Fistful of Metal,
Yes,
which
yeah.
is just, but that's like also at the same time, that's like my favorite Anthrax album cover. So, you know, it's it's kind of bad, but like I kind of love it. And
It's so
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, it's because thrash has, I feel like there's two ends of the spectrum. I think even just Metallica alone, because I feel like you have Kill 'Em All, which is, regardless of Metallica, pretty rough album art.
hmm
If you take it away from the music. And then you have
yeah,
72 Seasons, which I feel like is a little too artistic, maybe. It's a little too
polished,
much
yeah,
polished and much a piece of art where it doesn't really, it's like this is a thrash metal album cover, you
yeah.
know?
Well, it's very much this is Metallica in 2023, like or whenever
Yeah.
that was that last year,
That was
2023.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was last year. And even
Yeah.
even like Hardwired, I think
Well, and
also kind of has that 2016 look to it.
it's interesting, oftentimes I feel like bands with age, I don't know if they fully sometimes know how to adapt to their visuals as time goes on. Um, obvious, like, yeah, that's an example, but I don't know, like I like Alice Cooper's last album cover. I mean, I don't really listen to a lot of
Hmm.
his contemporary stuff, but like, I don't know, it's just
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
and it's you'll see that sometimes where it's like sometimes it'll be like design trends that happened like 10 years ago, but they're like using them now, and instead of it, and it doesn't have to be trendy. Like I don't care about trends per se, but they're kind of going after something that doesn't really fit with their stuff, but it like I don't know. It's a hard thing to describe, but I
I
know
know
what
what
you
you
mean. It's
mean.
like
Yeah.
it's funny because I really like the 72 seasons like cycle design because I'm also a graphic designer, so it like kind of scratches that itch for me. But like I don't know if I love it with like paired with Metallica per se. Like I
Yeah.
think it's really cool, but I don't know if like I don't know if it 100% gels with I don't know what I'm hearing, I guess. I don't know. Didn't hate that album though. I mean, it was all
Me
right.
neither. It definitely, it's one of those records where maybe if it was a single disc, I'd really, really like it.
Yeah.
The album's like an hour and 40 minutes or something. And like,
Yeah, especially like nowadays, I feel like huge bands that just have like an endless supply of money. I'm guessing. I mean,
yeah.
it's Metallica,
Yeah.
I don't think that's too far of a stretch. Will use absolutely everything at their disposal, to death almost. And, it's like I don't know if any album needs to be an hour and 40 minutes.
Well,
It's
look at Iron Maiden's new record,
yeah.
and I ended up getting the vinyl and it's like 4 discs. I will
Oh
say,
yeah.
it sucks that Derek is no longer working with them, but I will say that is one of the fucking coolest album covers.
Yeah.
For the Samurai Eddie, I thought
And
looked fucking
the inside
awesome.
of it is incredibly cool. Like
Yes.
the open
Oh,
spread. I loved that album. I was
me
actually
too.
I know some people were on the fence and like people kind of felt like Book of Souls was sort of a comeback album, and I like didn't it did never really fully click for me, but I really liked Senjutsu. I thought I don't
Yeah.
know, I it had a maturity to it that I think um I don't know. I think they really kind of knew themselves on it, and it was I don't know, it was good. But yeah, I love that full spread where it's like I do kind of wish it was on one disc, but like yeah,
Or two at
or
least.
two. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's cool. And I love all the more graphic art that went with it. And
Yeah.
it's there's a lot of cool stuff with that one. That cover is cool. I wish they weren't like my only gripe with it is the same with Book of Souls where it's kind of just on a black background, and I wish it was
Yeah.
if there's so much of that interior artwork, I wish maybe some of that was brought to the cover. But whoever they're using nowadays, which they're also on global merch services, so I guess I should know. But uh, whoever they're using for those covers is very talented, and um, I always love kind of the world building they have. Especially, I mean, maybe
I
that's
know,
one of the
right?
reasons I think about Derek Riggs is every album has that not necessarily concept, but it's not necessarily a concept album, but it's like it is kind of this general era we're in, like, how Power Slave is Egyptian and like the Senjutsu thing was cool just because of like the whole like samurai and all. I don't know. It's
And
just
the album's
awesome.
kind of themed that way too. It's just like
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah. Like how I know that like we were talking about Ghost earlier. I know Tobias has said before how his albums are kind of similar to um Iron Maiden albums and that they're not really concept albums, but like, you know, Impera is about like Power Slave is about pharaohs, but not capital P pharaohs. It's about, how that like, you know, people in positions of power and their rise and fall over time and how Impera is about it's not about one concept, but it's about empires in general. And
Yeah.
how Prequel is about, the plague, the medieval the Black Plague, which that's my favorite Ghost album. So, because I'm a
I,
huge medievalist, so of course it is.
yeah. For me, it has to be Meliora. That's will
Yeah,
always be my fucking.
it
That was
is the
like my
sweet spot.
intro to the
Yeah,
band, and just every song off it is just so amazing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's
man. Like,
cool.
yeah, so good, man. And
Yeah,
I know with 72 Seasons, it's an artist that Lars really likes, and I think already owns some of his pieces, and then just reached
yeah,
out to him as like, hey, just make. And it's not someone who does album art, but
yeah.
more of an actual artist because they're at that level where it's like, let's just have
Right.
any, you know.
Well, and they're so popular. It's like I would not have seen that cover and thought it was a metal album cover. You know, I like the concept of it a lot. I just, I think so. I think, well, maybe to kind of correct what I was saying earlier, but like bands that are so big nowadays, even metal bands, like I mentioned, like Alice Cooper and things like that, they will just like do that. They'll make covers that aren't necessarily metal looking, and that's okay. I don't necessarily hate that. It's just that like maybe if it doesn't vibe with it, it doesn't vibe with it. And
Yeah.
you took a risk and sometimes it pays off and like sometimes it doesn't pay off, but sometimes it really does pay off. So it's a real toss up.
Yeah, I think for me a big issue is just like the crib and then the really bright yellow. Like it was just
Yeah.
kind of a hard album to look at.
Yeah.
You know, if maybe I don't know what they could have done, but I don't know, man. I think bands just get so big where they don't really even think about, okay, what's the best way for, the music to be represented in a visual format. It's like, okay, let's just like hire a painter I really like
Yeah,
and
well,
just
and
have him do
also
whatever.
I think the bigger a band gets, the more they have to work to maintain the cohesion between the band and the art because oftentimes when you get bigger, you have more people at your disposal. So, and you have more resources. So you probably have a designer who will choose that for you,
Yeah.
or you'll have, which isn't a bad thing necessarily if it's done right. I don't work with Tobias from Ghost. I've never worked with him, but because they're at a point where they're just so big where it's like I work with the creative team. So when I work with someone on that creative team, they do know what they're doing. And they understand the band a lot. So luckily, I don't really run into that issue with them. But again, Ghost has only been around. I mean, I know they've been around like what, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah,
15.
which is crazy,
It
you
is
know.
crazy because I remember when they were really small and I was like, oh, this is a cool little band. And now it's like I can mention it to anybody and they'll like know who I'm talking about, which is nuts. They used to
Crazy.
just be like the Dead Pope band. So, uh, yeah, because I
Yeah.
saw them. First time I saw them was on the Infestissimum tour
Oh,
in 2013. So I
I'm
never saw
jealous.
Papa One. I was aware of them. I had listened to them, but I saw their tour on their second album, which was pretty cool. And it's crazy to have seen them. I saw them on their last tour, their second to last tour, because they didn't come near me on their last one. But and it's just crazy to see the difference in those shows. And now they had like a concert movie that was playing in a local theater, and it's
Yeah.
like how
Yeah,
do we get here? I mean, they deserve it. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
definitely.
they are kind of similar to a Kiss of our generation. It's just I think they make better music,
Yeah,
like
and
you
I
were talking
agree.
about.
I agree 100%. And it kind of, annoys me when people don't really see that comparison and people really just put them off.
Yeah, yeah,
It just really sucks because it's like they're
yeah,
actually like the kind of the better, newer version of it. Um,
yeah. I'm sure
but
someone will kill me for saying that, but
oh yeah, how do you
whatever.
yeah, me too.
I still love Kiss. I just, I don't really like sit down and listen to Kiss as much as I will sit down and listen to Ghost.
Hotter Than Hell will be a forever classic for me.
Oh yeah, don't get me
Anything
wrong. I
more.
mean, I like that was Kiss was a big intro to a lot of my tastes nowadays, which probably describes a lot. But people, it's very bubblegum. There's not a lot to it.
Yeah,
And that's okay. There doesn't have to be. But I like something like, Ghost where it's very much it's world building, it's thought out. There's a lot of
there's
depth
a
to these
vision. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a lot of depth to these characters and themes and,
Where
don't
Kiss,
get me
it's like, all
wrong.
right, how do we make the most money?
Yeah, and you
That's
know
really what
what?
it is.
And they do.
Yeah, yeah.
And if that is their goal, you know what? Good for them. I don't know whether I'll be seeing the digital avatars show that they'll be
Oh
doing
my,
here
yeah.
on out, but
I see. Yeah. I'd love to know what your thoughts were on the whole. I know AI has been sprinkled throughout this whole conversation, but the pestilence thing that happened, where I've never seen anything like this, where the band does their cover, a pretty big, iconic death metal band does their
yeah.
cover in AI, and then there's a ton of outrage, and then they backpedal and put out and delay the whole album, and then put out like an actual
Yeah.
cover. Did you follow that at all? And like, what was
Yeah,
your thoughts
it
on that?
was it was pretty funny. I do think to a degree, especially like I see it happen with kind of just an older generation of bands just seeing the technology and not thinking much of it and not really understanding the repercussions of it. But it's not that. It's that'll happen, but then it's the fact that they try to defend it so hard and it's like, do you
Yeah,
really know what you're defending? And I think in their case they didn't, and then they got pressured into it. And it's like the funny thing is like the AI art to begin with was terrible. And it was just like a photo. It was like pictures of them too. And
yeah,
it's like the band members, it's like I don't even know what you guys look like. So like it's whatever. Also I really like some of their I really what really bothered me about it was when they talked about they were like, you really think this is better than this? And they talked about their
yeah.
and they brought up the cover with the ants. What is it? Is it Consuming Impulse? Is that what it is?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. And was
Yes.
all the comments were just like, yes,
Like, yeah, it is better. Like, I love that cover. Yeah, it's a little like, you know, it's a little crude, but like, I don't know. It's
it is a death metal band though, and it's like I feel
yeah.
like, yeah,
Consuming
yeah,
Impulse. And I
it's
just
iconic.
remember them being it's like I don't know, like everyone remembers that cover though. And now it's like you're defending this shitty weird like the problem is too it's like it's not even objectively good looking. Like the new cover was just it was just bad. Like it's one thing to be unethical, it's another thing to just suck. And that
Yeah.
was the thing about it. And then they retroactively changed it unlike Deicide
Yes.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
who
Yeah.
like he defended that, Glenn defended that AI cover so hard and it's like there was one article that made me laugh so much about it and he was like no, like I am a creative person. Like I have an iMac Pro and an iPad and an iPad Pro. And like I don't remember it verbatim, but it was like there was a quote that was something like that, and it just made me laugh
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember laughing so hard seeing that. It's like, oh
Yeah,
my
but like
God.
more than anything, people just made fun of them for that cover. I mean, he defended it and defended it. Meanwhile, Pestilence, they changed it, which I guess I appreciate, but they were also like dicks about it too. It was like, yeah, oh yeah, here you go. I guess you guys wanted a different cover, so here's this. It's like it wasn't even really better or worse. I mean, I guess it was better because it wasn't AI, but like it was just like a picture of I don't know.
Yeah. It was
It
like a
still
picture of
wasn't,
them playing, I'm pretty sure.
which is fine, but I don't know. It's better than AI. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
funny
For
to me.
sure.
It was funny to follow that because that and the Deicide thing were happening concurrently, I feel like.
Yeah.
And that Deicide cover, they dropped it, and it's just like the amount of friends that I they never blocked me, but like I guess maybe because I didn't tag them when I was talking shit about it, like on social media.
I saw,
But
yeah.
I have so many friends who got blocked by Deicide because of that, and it's like I don't know. Personally, again, this just ties back in what we were talking about earlier. Like if I am either scrolling through music digitally or if I'm flipping through albums in a store, I'm just going to ignore it. Like if I see
Yeah.
AI, my instinct, okay, like I'm gonna ignore Facebook I don't have Facebook, so this is kind of made up, but uh I'm gonna ignore like AI Facebook posts made by someone's grandma. You know what I mean? Where they think it's it's like a picture of AI Jesus and it's like, you know, Donald Trump is in there somewhere and
Yeah.
there's a soldier defending a child. Like I'm gonna ignore that, and for those same reasons, I'm going to ignore an AI album cover because I don't want to see it. I'll see it and I'll be like, all right, cool, whatever. I'm gonna ignore it. I'm just pat. So you're completely just it's no matter how hard you work on an album, if you represent it visually with that, you just took all your hard work and you threw it in the trash.
Yeah, yeah,
At least
yeah.
that's how I like from my angle, that's how I see it. But
And to build upon your point, what you were saying earlier, but it kind of just like shows like how lazy the band is,
yeah,
And
because
it's
you
like,
can
am I gonna give you my time if you don't give a shit?
Yep. Because
You
you can
know?
pull things off on a shoestring budget. Like you can still get visuals on a shoestring. Like again, like what I said, Departure Chandelier, they have built an entire visual identity off of existing artwork and it
Yeah.
works. So yeah, I don't know. It's that was hilarious though. I remember it was like this whole saga of just well, Pestilence is doing this, Deicide's doing this, and just like everyone is just telling them to shut up, and it was hilarious.
I've only seen that in death metal, which is weird. Thrash metal
Yeah,
seems like, to be very committed to a style or to and even like black metal, even though Dark Thrones, I love Dark Throne. I
yeah.
hated the cover of their new album, which is like, I thought that
Really?
the girl skating.
Oh, that album. See, I was talking about the one that came out this year. That's Zabinho and
Oh,
Bilek
yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah.
Oh
Dark
my,
Throne's put out so many releases. It's
I know
crazy.
it really like it was hilarious. It just looked like an Instagram post from like 2012.
Yeah,
It was so funny.
and she has like a back patch of the album art you're looking at or something. It's like the weirdest black metal cover I've ever seen.
It is. It is really. It's clearly an afterthought, but it is almost like so hilarious that I appreciate it in a weird way. But
Especially after the cover that was before that, which I think might be my favorite Dark Throne cover of all
Eternal
time.
Hails.
Yes, where it's like the cave and it's like on a
Yeah.
planet or something. It's so cool.
I think they kind of did like a blood incantation with that too, where it's like
Yeah.
I think that's like a classic sci-fi illustration that has been around for a while, but they used, if I'm
Mhm.
not mistaken. I can't remember exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's just such whiplash between albums because I was like, damn, they really got a really, and it was a great record too. And it's like,
I
and
really liked it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and the one after that, I thought was a great record too, but it took me a while to listen to it because it was like one of those things where like just looking at the album art, it's like, what the
Yeah.
hell happened? Like, did they just steal someone's Instagram post, like you said?
Yeah, no, it is really funny. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I listened to that album or not because they put out so many albums these days that sometimes I lose track, but
Yeah, and
yeah,
there's so many
it's
bands
funny.
now. There's so many bands, which,
Yeah.
is probably great work for you because to be a band now, it's very easy to put out a release. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I know there's a lot of digital releases and stuff. That's why it's like, I mentioned it before, but Grimestone Records, run by Abysmal Spectre, who's like Bloody Keep, Old Nick, and Curtain Wall. I mean, he usually just puts his albums out on Bandcamp like right away, and then is like, all right, uh, and then puts physical releases out a little bit later. So, but I mean, they usually sell out, so like clearly knows what he's doing.
I'm not sure if you know the band King Gizzard and the Lizard
Oh
Wizard, but
yeah,
they,
oh
they put
yeah,
out 5 albums in October.
yeah. It's insane. I don't, and they're always like different, completely different albums too. Like
Yeah,
it's like a
yeah,
different genre every time. Yeah, no, good band. I really love their obviously, but I really always love their thrash stuff whenever they do it. Because
yeah.
the Dragon one,
Petro. Yeah,
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 that's a
yeah.
great. I mean, it's crazy how they
You
will
wouldn't
just
think it would be, you know?
you wouldn't think, but they unironically write like an incredible thrash album, and it feels like such an afterthought. So it's like, how are you that good?
Yeah, and even Rat's Nest, man, it's like the
Yeah,
production on it. They have like this old school production, but it's also like polished and sounds really
yeah,
good at the same time. It's like how are they doing this? And thrash bands, aren't really doing this.
yeah,
It's just it's crazy, man. There's such a creative band, but
yeah,
hey, man, it's been so sick talking to you.
yeah.
What's so for people who want to get in touch, commissions or want to work with you, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Instagram, NC Meihoff. It's just my first two initials in my last name. And I'll usually you could DM me over that, which I will inevitably direct you to my email though. So that's n.myhoff@gmail.com if you're interested in commissions. But yeah, my Instagram, I pretty much share everything that I'm working on and new releases and stuff in progress. So if you like what you see there and you want to get a hold of me, just reach out, however's easiest. Yeah, no, I always down to work with new people. So yeah, I don't really like to limit myself. So if you got a project in mind, hit me up. And yeah,
Doesn't matter if a book cover, whatever,
yeah, totally. I'm down for anything as long as it's cool. I'll do
Yeah.
it.
Well, no, it was great talking to you. Thank you so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, you too. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, yeah. I'm Brandon Battick, and this is Disturbing the Priest.